membership meeting on May of 2024. Thank you everyone for being here this evening, even though it's a little bit rainy outside. I wanted to also welcome those of you that are guests. Do we have any guests tonight with us? Ah, there we go. Everybody make sure to say hi and make you feel welcome. There's plenty of food over there as well. And do we have any class? I know the class just finished. Anybody still here? Ah, there we go. Ta-da. Oh, welcome. So today you'll probably see a lot of us with puffy faces and a little bit, it's a somber night. We have a couple of bad news. We have Millie, she lost her son today. And Ernestine got a card for us to pass around. So let me start that over here and we can pass. Just a second. Just pass it through, please, and then give it back to me or give it back to Ernestine. But if you give it to Ernestine, please let me know that you did that. But what is really hard for a lot of us is Mark Mullen died today. Mark Mullen, he was our treasurer last year as far as for me, I haven't known him as long as you guys, but he was a mentor. He was always super supportive.
He was the Plumeria guy.
He was the Plumeria guy.
He gave me lots of shoots, and I have a red one that I was just going to send him a picture and tell him it's blooming.
A shining example of what we all aim to be, not only as a master gardener, but as a person. So, personally, I think it's more important that if anyone would like to come up and say anything about him, if you need to tonight, would anyone like to? It's not saying anything if nobody wants to. I get it. We just all found out. But I think if you want to, you're welcome to.
I would like to say something.
Because you guys have known him longer. And he made such an impact on my life, and I've only known him a short time.
Yeah, he made an impact on all of our lives. I know when I was a student, he wasn't here when I was a student, but he was the very next year. And me as being new, he came to me and just helped me out. Got talked into doing the county fair, and I was really, really new, and man, he was there for me. I couldn't believe it. He came and volunteered for everything. Right after that, I don't know the year, but he was president of the Master Gardeners for a while. He served in that role. He served in a lot of different roles. He was a big part of a lot of our lives. He's going to be sorely missed. I can't say enough about him. He was the sweetest person. He would have given you the shirt off his back. He would have done anything for you. Shared his knowledge, shared his time, volunteered more than I could believe. I didn't even have to ask him. He just would show up and volunteer for me when I needed somebody. So I'm in total shock. I know everybody else is too. But please, if you have something to say nice about him, feel free to get it off your chest. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful person. He's going to be missed. And I hope that all of you are with me in helping to support Carol if you can. Kathleen is in contact with her, and we're going to try to do whatever we can to help her out as well. So thank you, y'all.
And of course, we don't have a card because we just
found out.
Not that that's all we're doing, but we don't have a card to pass out for that too.
And I was just going to say that when I was a student, Mark took me under the wing too, and he found out I liked plumerias, so he was always bringing me like pieces of it, which was really special. And just one of the last meetings, I told him I didn't have bread, and so he was supposed to bring it, forgot to bring it, ran home, brought it to me, and I'm sorry to say, it's now blooming, and it's red, And he was always there for you. And if you had a question, he was there to answer it for you. So yeah, that's a shock. Oh, man.
So I'm sorry if you're a guest, because tonight we're probably all going to be sniffling, and we don't have colds, I swear. Would anyone else like to talk?
Thank you, Sarah. I hesitated about coming up here because I don't quite know what to say. Mark touched so many people's lives in such a positive way. And he was a friend. He was not just a master gardener, he was a friend. And he was a friend in all the ways that friend means. So I know a number of people reached out to Carol, and hopefully she will let us know what, if anything, we can do. And if there's a memorial of some sort, we will certainly let everybody know.
Yes, we'll let everybody know.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Thank you, everybody, and we're going to try to continue on. If I start crying too much, the slides will be loaded up, and if we have trouble getting through them, you can ask us about it later, or look on VMS. I promise we'll put them up. All of it seems just a mute point now. Okay, so I call for motion to approve and vote the membership meeting minutes for last month. Okay, Denise is first. Do we have a second? That'd be Kay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So you know, and I did double check this before I put it on here, the May board meeting minutes are now posted to VMS. Beware, it is very long. We talked about a lot. So go on there, it's a good read. And a reminder, as always, the board meetings are always open to everyone. It is the second Thursday each month. We start at 6 p.m. Please arrive early to ensure your seating, because we try to have the board all sit at the table so that, for one thing, we know who's voting and who's speaking for the secretary. And also, a couple of us are a little bit hard of hearing still, so that table's for the board, and then as we can sit elsewhere. And Travis has asked us to be up in our room if at all possible, and if there's space, then we're elsewhere. If you need to be added to the agenda to speak, please contact me ahead of time, at least by Wednesday, so I can add you to the agenda. Otherwise, it will be, if there is enough time, at the end of the meeting. And at the bottom of all my slides, you can take a picture, is my contact information. Okay, a notice was sent out on May 8th that Beth Smith resigned as president-elect on April 28th. It seemed like it had been such a long time that I almost forgot to add it to this slide. She took a step back from most of her other volunteer duties as well for medical reasons. So as we also put out an email, if anyone is interested in nominating someone or putting their own name in for president-elect for the remainder of this year, and for those of you that do not know, that would mean that next year you would be the president. If so, then we will vote on that in July. Please contact me or any of the other board members if you have questions. Denise put out a survey for the fundraising committee. I'm sorry I did not email you yet, but be on the lookout for that email that is on my list over the next couple of days for the fundraising committee. And the idea is that it's not taking up so much of the board time, the board meetings, talking about fundraising, that it would be a group of people talking about that and presenting the points to the board. Those of you that have garden projects, be on the lookout for an email from Maria if you have not already gotten it about your fall gardens and the budgets. That was something that we talked about during the board meeting as well, so you can look at the meeting minutes. But keep an eye out for an email. Currently, there are no plant sales planned until the fall. As you know, Beth was in charge of plant sales. We were filling in for her at the time, and all of us taking a little bit of a step back. So stay tuned for the more plant sales in the fall. Grow team supplies. If any of you have any supplies that were lent to you, like the lights, the heating mats and such, please bring them back so that we can do an inventory of that. Even if you plan on continuing to be on the grow team in the spring and such, we need to do an inventory of our assets, because we do that every year. There's, I know there's a correct word for that. There's what? An audit? Yes, thank you. The audit. I don't like that word, so apparently it's just, no, I don't want to remember that one. So please bring them, even if you intend to be back in the spring. So one of the things that I sent out an email actually today about to the people that I know that have stuff in the shed or in the office, both our shed and not the office is bad, it's overcrowded, but they're a little dangerous. I don't want anybody, a lot of the times we go out into that, or even up in the office, you're alone, and I'm afraid somebody's going to have like a whole thing of boxes fall over to them when they're trying to move it to get to the back. We don't want that to happen. Both for you and for the stuff there too. You're the more important part of that. That we are contacting the people first that we know have projects that are affected by that, like the county fair or the class or the library books, that we are contacting them first to see when is good for them and what is special. And then we'll get the muscle involved and help, and we'll get all of that organized for multiple reasons. I mean, so that we know for the new year what we need to budget for organization purposes, so that we know who are the POCs on those different items, so you can find it quicker, that sort of thing. It has to do with our assets as well. And a very quick thank you for all of those that helped with Earth Day. I know I had a really great time. I'm sorry I don't have the exact number because it got combined with different things. But we did pretty good, and I really appreciate all of your help, and I had a really good time with you. I told you I had a lot for mine this time because I'm filling in. Okay, there's no membership meeting here in June, so if you show up, we won't be here. Instead, we are going to have our yearly summer social. So, of course, we socialize, we celebrate the new graduates from our most recent class, woo! And that is going to be at the Seguin Schoolyard. And it used to be called the Backyard here in Seguin. They have a large area, there's a bar, there's 2 restaurants on premises. So we don't have to bring food, we don't have to set it out, we don't have to clean up after ourselves. It's a win-win situation. Friends and family are welcome. We may even have some karaoke if we can get it set up. It's going to be a great time. Bring everybody. We're going to have fun. I haven't been able to go to one of the socials, so I'm pumped because every year somebody gets sick or something happens. I'm like, here's your vitamin. Everybody feel good. What? I have 7 people in my house. My parents live with me, and then I have 3 kids and my husband and I. So it's like the end of the school year. We're on our last part. So Denise is going to come up. You know what I'm talking about. You got kids too. Denise is going to come up and do the Starfish Awards. Is this loud enough for everybody? Yes. Okay. Here. That's all right.
Is there anybody who would like to nominate anybody or present a starfish? I think there are a couple of people who told me they wanted to. They might not be here.
But then they said they weren't going to be here.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay. No starfish today.
It's okay. Okay. So, I know you guys probably see there, I have a special announcement. How could I have anything else to talk about? Well, okay, there's Starfish. Special announcement is, we have a communications director! Ingrid, come on down. She came to our board meeting and asked us questions, and we asked her questions, and it felt like we were on a date or something. But it was great. We all clicked, and we asked her to come on, and she wonderfully agreed. So I'm going to give her time to introduce herself like she would normally in our meetings. Here you go, my dear.
Thank you. So my name is Ingrid Logan. I originally am from New York. I was born in New York. And like a lot of people, well, I was a little kid when my mom, brought us south, but then I went into the military and ended up here and ended up loving Texas so much that I stayed. So I still think I'm a Texan. I might have not have been born here, but I am. But I want to do the best that I can for you guys. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you guys to do is my email's up, and you can text me, but tell me what you want your social media to look like. Tell me, things that you think that we need as far as communications. I'm all ears, and I'm like, let me know what you want. Because I'm working for you. I'm not working for myself. I'm working for you, and I want you guys to be happy. So I guess that's kind of my spiel. Yes?
We appreciate you, and it's nice having the meetings that if you can't make it, and as long as we can hear as well as see, we're happy.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. But if you guys need, like I said, if you need anything, let me know. Yeah. And I know you guys have some great ideas. So thank you.
We are very excited about that, very much so. And I think I'm just double checking that I did everything for mine that I needed while Bill is coming up. Come on, Bill. Yes, I'm good. I have something I passed to Maria, but there you go.
Oops. I'm there. Heavy heart tonight. I had just talked with Mark maybe 5 days ago. We kind of had this thing, I called him the money pit with his home. He called me the Commodore because I'm always cruising. And we always saw eye to eye, and Mark always reminded me it was because we were the same size. So I think the only thing I can say about Mark is Mark was an icon to me. He displayed everything a Master Gardener should be, and he did it all. Through the good, bad, and the ugly, he always had a smile on his face, and I knew. So hope we can support Carol throughout this whole thing. So just quick snapshot. We are definitely getting better on our educational hours. We're down 27. The 1+ hours kind of stayed the same, but we're moving forward. So we had 11 members that went above 2.5, and we had 17 new members that moved about 6. So we're about 60% through having all of our education hours for the year. Oops. I'll get it. Our Lunch and Learn for this June is going to be Nathan Herman. He's from Prairie View A&M. He'll be doing Buzz About Bees. I know we're down for June, but we're still going to have a Lunch and Learn for June for those folks that have an opportunity to get more hours. Seguin Public Library, Growing Herbs. April will be doing that in Seguin. We did it in shirts, and let me tell you, it was amazing. We did event registration. I was told we had about 15 people. The class was almost full. I read 15 names off the list, and none of them were in the classroom. So when it was all said and done, we ended up with 34 people in that classroom. The library was pulling their hair out because the fire marshal only allowed 22. but we did it anyways, and it was great. It was a great presentation. So if you weren't in shirts, go to Seguin. Great presentation. I'll be doing the shirts library in June. I'll be doing the Seed Saving Basics in shirts, so don't miss that one. The Shadow, I don't know if, I'm sure there are people in here the same age I am and can remember the radio show The Shadows, so I had to throw that up there. So I'm looking for Speaker Bureau, and I know the class is over with, but it was kind of towards the intern side of the house, but I'm going to open it up to the entire membership. So the Shadow program is for the Speakers Bureau. If you're interested in the Speakers Bureau, we would like to have you shadow a person who's doing a presentation. And that shadow will give you the opportunity to get some on-the-job training. So you'll be able to see what it's like to set up the presentation, do the surveys. It'll give you an opportunity to gain some skills out of it, plus get hours. So if you're interested in the Shadow program, let me know. I'll get you a schedule. It'll be between Shirts and Seguin, and I know we have large amounts of people on either side of the house. And of course, if you miss these presentations, please don't forget on VMS. We have all of these presentations there where you can go back and get hours. So don't feel like you're rushed. I would like to see you attend these in person, but if you miss it, please go out to VMS and look at these. This whole thing was built to make it easy for you, so utilize it. Thank you.
Next, we have Maria. She has a lot of stuff to cover too, just like me. She's been doing so much. Thank you so much, girlie.
Thank you. I don't think I need this, do I? Can I hear me? Okay, so first off, the shirts plant sale was a very big successful. So thank you so much for everyone who came out, volunteered. I try to post as many pictures on our Guadalupe County Master Gardeners Facebook page. And so you guys probably saw pictures on there. This is what happens when we diversify ourselves out there and go to other places other than Seguin. So according to Claire, the raffle we made 165 and plants we made a little over 2,000, and that's amazing. Woohoo! So thank you for everyone that came out to help, everyone who was just supportive, so thank you for that. As a reminder, tomorrow we're having a working day at the Shirts Demonstration Garden to help them get ready for the summer. There's a lot of things that need to be done. I sent out a list in that email. We have like 11 beds to turn over, fertilize the dirt. We have, on top of harvesting the vegetables for the local food banks as well. So, weeding. Oh yeah, and lots of weeds all the time. Lots of weeds. But I don't know if you guys have gone out there. It's a really beautiful garden, and then in the front of the garden, right in front of the fence, it's actually part of the Native Plant Society, and they have the butterfly garden, which is beautiful. Like they have all the plants, and the butterflies are everywhere. So I occasionally take whenever the school decides not to have a school day, which I don't know why. Anyway, I take my kids to the garden and they love it because there's butterflies everywhere. And you met Ava, she's a talker. So, yeah, she's only 8. Yeah, she likes the water. Yeah. As mentioned by Sarah, we are going to have another approved gardens projects meeting tentative for July. More to come on that. We're trying to narrow down the date. And we would like to have it in person like we did last time, and also offer the opportunity to do it through Google Meet. So more to come on that. Just check your emails for all the POCs out there, Carol, Caroline, everybody. So start thinking about what your needs are for your project or garden, and what your goals and your concerns are right now. How can we help you? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. Because in the fall is when we talk about the budget as well and how much money we're gonna give out to all the gardens. So that's a good time for you to start telling us what you need, okay? So start thinking about that. Again, the email will be sent out on that. Grow team updates. Currently, we haven't really had a grow team, but that's okay. We, adapt and re-engage into other ways that we can help the gardens. So currently, we are helping out the Shirts Demonstration Garden by growing melons, okra, and Paul's been growing tam jalapenos for them. So that's another, on Friday, tomorrow, when we go to the Shirts Demonstration Garden, we might be planting those in the ground as well. So you guys might be concerned about the weather if you are going to go out there tomorrow. Don't worry, Dell will send us an email, but you are also more than welcome to give me a call. My phone number is, if you want to write it down, 210-792-1603. When I hear from Dell,
We can post it on VMS
and VMS too as well. So, but
if it's canceled.
if it's canceled, yeah. But I've gone out there when it's like kind of like this, and we still do stuff. So, yeah, yeah. Oh, what was that?
There's not gonna be any rain.
There's not. Okay. I don't know. This weather's crazy. Like
Yeah, no chance.
I didn't even see any rain in the forecast, and it comes all of a
My
sudden.
plants are going over everything.
Wow.
The weather will be good.
It's like
What was the number again?
210-792-1603.
It has to be pretty bad for Dale to keep.
Yeah, it does.
And you can
That
look
was-
her up on VMS if you can,
Yeah.
if you lose that number.
So, the grow team, we talked about this at the BOD meeting, and we are considering helping the gardens out by buying plants for them instead of trying to grow plants
For this fall.
For this fall. So just keep that in mind, whatever. So if that's another thing that you're gonna wanna need, certain plants for the fall, please, vocalize that at the meeting when we have it in July. Okay? So. Yep, so I just talked about all that. And then another working group that is also in the works is the Marion Veteran Memorial Park will be having a work day as well on May 25th, which is a Saturday. It will start at 8 in the morning. They're getting ready to start their preparation for the memorial ceremony that's going to be happening on the 31st of May. So it was a last minute notification that they're going to be having something. So we need to go and help out the Marion Garden now. So
Make it look all pretty.
yeah, make it look all pretty. And I don't know if you guys have gone there. That's another beautiful garden as well. You've gone there too, right? Yeah. Thank you, actually. Yeah, so let's put those dates in your calendar for tomorrow at the Shirts Demonstration Garden, and then May 25th will be at the Marion Veterans Park. Okay? So, and this beautiful lady right here is the POC for that garden. So, yeah, but everybody knows it.
I love it.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see everyone there on the 25th as well. Okay.
Next slide.
Volunteers needed.
Oh, you said
Bonnie
that?
talked about that. Next one.
Okay.
Also, we are looking for volunteers who are interested in recording or taking pictures for continuing education presentations, events, and also to post pretty pictures, current pictures on our social media to help Ingrid out as well. We're just trying to improve everything, make everything look prettier, catch attention, and get more people to take our classes as well. So. And then we are also putting together our nominating committee for next year's board of directors. So if you're interested in joining the committee or the board for next year, it's a great opportunity for you to get my job and do this. It's fun. So if you want to nominate someone, let Sarah know. And
Ben is
If you
going to
wanna-
be the POC
Yeah.
technically, but she's not here tonight, so
Yeah.
you can always talk to any of us.
Yeah.
But it's good to have for I think it should be a mixture of old and new members in this nominating committee, because some of you know what it takes, and different people who've done it before and be like, oh, they didn't do so good at that, or those people are awesome at that, we need to nominate them, that kind of thing. We really need that help, so.
In my experience, being the volunteer director has really, I've met so many great folks in this organization, and all the gardens that I've visited so far are just amazing. And like, we're out there volunteering, doing great things for the community. It's like a great way to learn more about this organization. So my position will probably be out there as well. So yeah, like, you can do it, you know, so.
We got the float.
Oh yeah, the float. 4th of July float here in Seguin. Has anyone ever been to the Seguin parade? It's amazing.
And we won last year.
Yeah,
But
first place.
if we don't, if no one volunteers, we won't do it.
Yeah. So if no one volunteers to step it up and do a float this year for the Seguin parade, then unfortunately we won't have a float.
We would need to know ASAP to enter into it, so.
And the questionnaire the survey that I sent out today, that's already got a couple of yeses.
Yes.
Woo, okay.
If you're interested,
I will
respond.
contact them, sorry. Okay, the county fair booth. Ba-ba-da-da. So, okay. Kathleen, this is her last year as the county fair coordinator, unless she changed her mind? Okay, just, I gotta double check. And so she would like to have whoever's going to do it next year, and we all kind of feel that, hey, maybe it should be a group, a committee that does it, so it's not so much just for one person, but that can shadow her as we go through it, so you know how she does it this year, and it's not just a list that you're trying to follow and guess that you're doing it right, because she does an amazing job. I don't know how she does it all, and I've only gone a couple of years. So if you're interested in that committee for the county fair, it is a lot of fun. We have a group together. We would shadow her, and if you have any questions, I'm sure she could answer pretty much anything, because she's got a lot of experience on that.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
that was it. And I'm sure you've noticed, thank you very much, by the way. Claire is not here today. She is on vacation. Good for her. So she is on vacation, our treasurer, and then until the 24th. And then on the 26th, I'm going to be on vacation. My in-laws are taking my family on a cruise. Yay. So nice. So I'm going to be gone for a week. So if you are looking for one of the board members and you can't reach them, just keep trying. You'll get one of us. Somebody, we're just doing carnival. I'm going to be in Mexico, but I got to turn off phones. So, yes. No, you're fine. I was about to do the financial. What's yours?
I want to thank everybody who helped with the school tours at the Big Red Barn. And you're truly appreciated, and it was great practice for the fall tour.
Bum, bum, bum.
Just giving you a warning, fall tours coming up, fall tours are bigger in terms of time and stuff than the spring tours are. So, but thanks so much.
Yes,
Really appreciate it.
definitely. Thank you, everyone. So just real quick, she had sent me a very short email. She must have been like, I'm out of here. So the highlights are the bank balance, as you can see on this page, as of April 30th is $40,349.90. And this will be on VMS, so if you want to look closer at it. Hold on, I lost my notes. Where'd it go? Okay, there's mine. And I know that for the fundraising income, let's see here. Oh, okay. She averaged, so $3,395 for April. So the plate sales that we had, that was our fundraising income. And year to date is $6,305.72. I like to count the cents, maybe because I got the kids and every cent counts. They're like, Mom, can I have your 72 cents? Okay. Okay, making sure I cover everything she asked me to. The net overall in and out, and I'm not sure where it was here, I'm so sorry. Oh, at the bottom? Oh, sorry, here we go. Net overall in and out, looks like we are, for April, we were $232 about doing good, but for the year, we are negative $2,516.50. Okay, so normally we take like a very, yes, Wendy, my love, what do you need? Yes, I know.
We are going to take one.
Okay.
Quick, because she's going to put her slide in a minute.
Okay, got you. But it will be very, very quick. But wait, Wendy wants to say something. Come on up here, dearie. Vice President Wendy. She's so bright and colorful.
Yes. Trying to lighten the mood. I'm good.
Okay.
I raised 5 daughters. They can hear me. I just wanted to let y'all know that a lot of the board and members were at Benna's grand opening of what's it called, Mill Street?
Yes, they changed the name of it.
Mill Street Community Garden, we thought was growing futures. Anyways, Benna took this, a fun story that she shared with us, is that they asked her if she would make a salsa garden, 10 by 10 bed, and if she would plant that for the community, for the foster, what is that, they're part of it, I can't remember. Anyways, yeah, so
Planting
connections.
seeds of love or
Yeah,
something
seeds of
too.
love, connections. But what happened at this garden, thanks to all the volunteers and Benna and the other organizations, is there's a huge garden there. And it's producing so much food.
What, like about the length of this room or maybe even more?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it is huge.
So if you haven't got a chance to go out there, please do. And I have some extra of these papers if anybody wants to look at them on the back table. I've got yours on mine. Yes. And so when you see Benna, just give her a big thumbs up. So my guest is already here, so we're just going to take 5 minutes. In June, we do not have a speaker or a meeting, and in July, Andy Blair is back. And today I booked Charlie B. Company. And so I'm real excited about that. Intro to beekeeping and what we need to plant for his bees. So I was there in person today, and he is more than happy to do it. Probably be like October, November. He's a little busy right now.
He's a busy
All right, you guys
bee.
take a break and please come back.
Okay, thanks everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Judith Green, and she is an urban wildlife biologist with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And her talk tonight is going to be on habitats for hummingbirds and butterflies. So I know that's a hot topic for everybody. So we're looking forward to what you have to tell us and teach us. And we appreciate you taking your time to come.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So before I get started, I just want to make sure, can everybody hear me okay? Because there is Okay. If y'all can't hear me, then just wave both hands, and that'll be your cue that I need you to ramp it up, or we can put the microphone on. So I appreciate you, excuse me, all being here tonight. I will ask, if you don't mind, to participate in the survey. It's just I just ask some basic information, and that way it's due to the funding that we receive. They just kind of want to know essentially what we're doing and kind of that y'all are receiving the benefits of us going out and speaking to the public. So if y'all don't mind, and I will show this one more time at the end if you don't catch it this time. But in any case, I appreciate you being here tonight, and we're going to have fun, I hope, talking a little bit about some of the hummingbirds and butterflies in the area. Hopefully give you some insights as to how to identify some of them, but also, more importantly, how to create habitat for them. And a lot of times when I go to different talks, I don't usually talk about wildlife management to kind of urban residents or people who live in communities. Even small towns like Seguin, for the most part, are very much urbanized. So, what we do in our small properties, our backyards, can be so important for a lot of our smaller wildlife species that migrate through Texas, that reside here in Texas. And unfortunately, development is not stopping any time in the future. So this great state of Texas is continuing to get developed. If anybody's ever traveled on I-35 northbound, I mean, my gosh, I used to remember, I could tell when I was going from one town to the next. Now, if you're just kind of watching traffic, you have no idea unless you know the cues on the side, you know, that you're in some community. So it's expansive, unfortunately. But there is a solution, definitely, for a lot of our wildlife species if you can put in a habitat for them. And a lot of times what I refer to, and gardening is, of course, the same thing. It's whether you call it gardening, whether you call it habitat gardening, whether you call it, you know, just whatever, butterfly and hummingbird, pollinator gardens, whatever you choose to call it, it doesn't matter. If you're putting in plants that are native to the area, and if you're providing some source of water, then you're doing a wonderful thing. It's a simple equation that I will get more in depth to. Before I get started, I wanted to also mention the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. This is an act that unfortunately is kind of on hold right now, but if you hear about it again in the future, it is an immense opportunity for us to essentially bring more dollars for conservation in the state of Texas. And the beauty about this act is it doesn't just benefit Texas, it benefits all of the United States. So every single state will reap the benefit. It's kind of a grassroots effort. Here in Texas, we're looking at possibly getting $50 million from this act if it is passed eventually. We've been trying for the last 3 legislative sessions. Unfortunately, it has kind of it almost made it this last time and then just kind of fell short. So again, I think we're taking a break, and then I think it's going to be reintroduced again. So if you hear about, again, it's called RAWA, R-A-W-A for short, RAWA. Again, it stands for Recovering America's Wildlife Act. If you hear about it, then please, I encourage you to reach out to those that represent our great state and encourage them to support this act, so that way we can get those conservation dollars here to Texas. I mean, right now we're looking at about a $3 million a year budget for non-game species. So this would be a massive, massive amount of money compared to the past and what we normally can get for the state and conservation for non-game. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you all knew that that was happening. For a lot of our pollinators, a lot of our species of greatest conservation need, we have several that are pollinators, believe it or not. So again, money would go towards that. So we're here today to talk about habitat gardening. That's what I chose to call it. So again, it fits those of you who are into wildlife management, or if you have large acreage, it doesn't matter. What I'm sharing with you today is similar information that I would share with an average landowner that has 1,000 acres. You know, the concepts are pretty much the same, and it's easy to do, especially in a smaller property, you know, when you're talking about just gardening. So hopefully we can get everybody on board with enhancing their properties so that we can have more acreage on the ground that is enhanced after it's been developed. So who pollinates in the state of Texas? We have a lot of different species. Of course, we're here today talking about hummingbirds and butterflies, and they are both pollinators. But the number one species is actually bees. We have about 750 native bees. Of course, most of you are familiar with honeybees, which are not truly native, but they, of course, do help pollinate a lot of our crops across the state. But we do also have native bees, too, a variety of them. And the beauty about bees is oftentimes when they go out and forage for food, they will decide on a given day, we're going to go out and look for clover. And then they will hit all the clover plants. And then the beauty of that is when they collect that pollen as they're visiting those plants, they've got all this wonderful clover pollen on themselves as they're flying from clover plant to clover plant. And so bees, or any kind of pollinator that's visiting a lantana, then a Mexican sage, thank you, any kind of salvia, it's got all kinds of pollen all over its body. And yes, some of that pollen will wind up on the correct plant. But again, with bees, if they're hitting clover that day, then obviously they're going to do a lot more pollinating with that particular plant, whatever the plant of choice is for the day. So that's the beauty of the fact that they are so specific about a plant. Of course, in In the world, our monarchs, we know for a fact, and especially in the last couple of years, we've realized that the monarch population has been declining. The nice thing about that is people love monarchs. It's kind of like a very friendly butterfly. I know probably about 20 years ago, I think the agriculture departments, they tried to promote bees and try to save the bees. But that was right about the time that we had those, what was it, the killer bees? What was it? Africanized bees. So that was almost in unison right about that same time. So of course people, they didn't understand that we have native bees too that we want to benefit, but unfortunately because there was so much in the news about the Africanized bees, nobody was like on board with that. It was like, oh, I don't think I want to encourage bees to come to my yard. The beauty now is of course, a lot of that has subsided, and thankfully a lot of those Africanized bees have again hybridized over the years and over the various over the various years, and so therefore they are not, I mean, you just don't hear about them anymore. And so people have kind of forgotten about it, and the nice thing is now when people are wanting to do good things for instance, the monarch, they are much more readily available to think about putting in pollinator gardens and not focusing so much on the fact that, oh my gosh, bees would come too, because they will. Because again, we have several varieties of native bees too, and of course the honeybees. They really, unless you're swatting them, really that's not ever a good idea. I know people freak out, but doing this, remember when you have a bee, be very gentle and kind of back out if you have one bee flying around, but when you start swatting, then that's what kind of gets you stung sometimes, because especially with the honeybees, I think sometimes. But just be very calm and try to remove yourself from the situation if you can. But again, the monarch now serves almost as a great ambassador. Because of their decline, the population has declined about 90%, so we have very few monarchs. And of course, many of you, I don't know if you know this or not, but it takes about 4 generations as it migrates northbound, as far north as Canada. And then that last generation is the longest lived generation. It lives about 8 months. And it makes that journey all the way from Canada down to Mexico. So, and that's usually in the fall, around September, late September, early October, mid-October timeframe. So it's the longest lived generation. It overwinters in Mexico, and then that longest lived generation not only travels southbound through Texas, but also it's the first one to come back in the spring. So we actually are seeing that longest lived generation when we see a monarch in our area here. And so it's an oldie, because most butterflies don't live quite that long. And so, again, we want to make sure we have plants in the ground that the monarch can use, a lot of different pollinating plants, so nectar-producing plants, as well as milkweed plants, because especially in the spring, they are looking to lay eggs. That's the whole idea in the spring. So they will start laying eggs as soon as they start kind of hitting South Texas. So we want to make sure, and there is a great PDF, and I apologize, I couldn't find it before I came tonight. I wanted to add it to my presentation, but if you Google Texas milkweeds, there is a PDF document, and it actually is by county. So you can look and see what county, like Guadalupe County, you can see what milkweeds are normally found here, and you can essentially look for them on your property, especially if you have some acreage, so that you're not removing them. Some of them are very inconspicuous, they're not very obvious. Some of them have beautiful bloom heads that are more obvious. So again, it is important to kind of know what milkweeds you have here, so you're not accidentally mowing over them, especially in the spring when the monarchs are looking for them, should you have some coming this way. So as far as being pollinator friendly, the main thing, there's a lot here, again, using native plants, things blooming from early spring or throughout the different seasons, from early in the year until late in the year if you can, have things blooming. And then, of course, the flower shapes and colors sometimes matter for hummingbirds. They do like tubular for hummingbirds, but the butterflies tend to like smaller blooms that almost have a nice little landing pad for them, and then they'll take their little tongue-like proboscis and stick it into each flower and drink from it. Typically, I encourage you to avoid the modern hybrids. Like there are some, for instance, hibiscus. We have a native hibiscus, but some of these hibiscus that have a bloom about the size of my head, and of course, it sometimes doesn't offer much in the way of nectar. Just because you have a bigger bloom doesn't mean you're getting a lot of food as far as wildlife is concerned. But sometimes with the hybridization, some of the good qualities of that plant sometimes can actually be taken out of the plant itself. So stick, if you can, with natives whenever possible. And then the most important thing is also, especially for hummingbirds, well, mainly butterflies, excuse me, is that clustering flowers is a wonderful opportunity because they, again, will see the colors and it offers them opportunity to kind of hit a lot of flowers. So if you can, if you pick a particular plant, go ahead and plant maybe 3 or 5 of that particular plant and group them in one big mass planting. And that will allow those butterflies to visit each bloom. And when you're watering, I do want to add this before I forget, when you're watering any of your plants, don't spray over your plants because you're diluting whatever nectar is being produced by that particular bloom. So instead, water at the base of the plant so you're getting to the roots, because I have seen people before water that way. They're just kind of, and sometimes their hose doesn't reach and so they're kind of squirting the water, but that does deplete some of the nectar. But the most important thing of this particular slide are the bottom left and right side, which is 5 and 7, and that really highlights the fact that a lot of our butterflies do produce caterpillars, and I say that because I think most of you know that, but if you don't have the caterpillars, you're not going to have the adult butterflies. And I remember one time talking to a gentleman for, I don't know, a good 20 minutes. He was just bragging about all the wonderful things he was doing, and I was, we were just talking plants, and I was like amazed at all the wonderful plants he had. He had larval host plants, and a larval host plant is a plant. So our butterflies will, some are what we call generalists. They'll lay their eggs on any given plant. And then some butterflies are very specific to a particular type of plant group. And so like, for instance, the monarchs and the queens, they love the milkweed plants. And so they have to have those milkweed plants, otherwise they won't lay their eggs. So if you want to have monarchs and help monarchs, you got to have some milkweed on your property. So this gentleman was, again, telling me about all the wonderful things, and so he also was telling me about plants that I knew were larval host plants. And then at the end of our conversation, I was just, again, just amazed at all the stuff he was sharing. And then he looked at me and goes, "But those darn caterpillars." And he used a more explicit word other than darn. And he goes, "Every time I see one, I flick them off and I stomp on them." And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what to say. I was like, you obviously know they are turning into butterflies. I just was shocked. I did encourage them to plant more to allow, and then maybe pluck the caterpillars and move them to one so he could have some plants, and then some would get eaten. But again, the way nature works is a lot of the plants that are larval host plants, the beauty is that once they get eaten down, they oftentimes come back pretty quickly. Because again, the job continues for this plant. And of course, it wants to continue to thrive. So for those of you who are concerned about the fact that, all these little larva species are eating down your plants that you work so hard to grow, maybe you didn't know it was a larval host plant. But in turn, you're creating a nursery essentially for a lot of our butterflies. And it is important to keep them. And like I said, you can remove them off of some and move them to others. So that way they're kind of honing in, right, they're honing in on, a grouping over here, and you still can have at least 1 or 2 beautiful plants. But I guarantee you the butterflies will still probably lay their eggs eventually on that one. And then the only other thing I want to make sure, and I will probably reiterate this multiple times, but pesticides and herbicides in the garden really need to be kind of pulled back. A lot of times just evaluate, do you really have a need? Because sometimes many of us, I just heard a talk the other day and the gentleman was saying most of us, we get on these regular scheduled, sprayings, if you will, both inside our homes and around our homes, and even mosquito spraying is really popular these days. It's kind of a big push with companies. And, unless you have a severe problem of some particular species or critter, try alternative methods, and even organic methods. You do need to be a little bit cautious with those as well because, it just depends. You just want to make sure that it can be as targeted as possible. But again, these chemical uses, for instance with mosquitoes, you can spray a yard. Mosquitoes can travel up to 25 to 35 miles, the adults, and so you can have a party spray, and you can have it sprayed frequently, but outside mosquito, I mean, there's no dome over your yard. So if you're in your backyard having a party, and there's a bunch of people out in the backyard, there will be mosquitoes, guaranteed. You're not going to keep the mosquitoes away because you've been spraying for the last year or 2 or 10. So what you're doing, though, unfortunately, is you are impacting not only mosquitoes, but also a lot of the other pollinators. So anytime you spray your plant, anytime you spray the ground, then the plants potentially are obviously impacted. They are harboring the insecticide or herbicide, and then of course any animals that feed off of the fruit or the nectar on that plant will be affected. Yes, ma'am.
So some people know they spray permethrin for fleas for their dogs all over their yard. Is there anything they can use instead of that? Because fleas are really, really bad this season.
Well, I mean, like with my dog, I use something like Frontline. I put it directly onto, and there are different collars, there are different things. There's a pill that you can give to your pups as well that deters fleas. So it's kind of the same scenario. I mean, you can spray chemicals, but unfortunately, when you spray chemicals, I mean, fleas, the fleas that are in the yard, if it really is really bad, I mean, they may be obviously affected, and of course, all other species of insects will probably be affected as well. But ultimately, that's going to wear off, and then, you know, if the neighbor has a host of fleas, they'll eventually wind up in your yard. So the best way to really protect your pets sometimes is through some of the things that the veterinarians can offer you. And so I would check into that too, because again, some dogs are sensitive, you know, so you just want to be careful what you're putting on your dog and seeing what kind of organic methods you can use. So I'm not an expert on that, but that would be my suggestion. Always just investigate. All right. So let's talk a little bit about hummingbirds, and I do want to be mindful of the time, so I have until how long to speak?
8.
Until 8, okay. Okay, got it. No problem, I hear you. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the life history, basic needs, and garden design. I threw in a few tips on hummingbirds and butterflies. And of course, you all know what this hummingbird is? What is it? Oh, ruby throat, that's right, it is listed there. And then anybody know what the butterfly is?
The butterfly is a pipeline swallowtail.
Yes, so definitely swallowtail. You can kind of see the little projections. Yes, awesome, very good. And so one thing I do want to say about hummingbirds is that the pictures I'm going to be showing you on the hummingbirds will be of the male species, because in the bird world, of course, as we know, the males are the ones that are very ornate, and they're the ones who are, that's right, they dress up. You know, they're wanting to attract the ladies, so they're doing their best. And so the key thing, if you really want to identify a hummingbird, is if you're looking at the bird, you want to always make sure the sun is behind you. If the sun is behind you, then you're seeing the true colors off of that bird. If the sun and the bird, if you're kind of looking at both, then what will happen is you won't see the iridescence being reflected from the sun. And so ultimately it may just look black. And you'll think, oh, it's a black-chinned hummingbird, when in reality that is not the case at all. It could be a ruby throat, it could be a number of other species. So keep that in mind. Sun behind you, bird in front of you. So we will talk a little bit about hummingbirds. So just out of curiosity, how many of you know how many hummingbirds we have in the state of Texas?
6.
I heard 6, okay. Anybody else want to venture a guess?
18.
18. Who cheated and read the screen? Yes. So when I first moved to Texas, there were about 5. We thought there were only about 5 main hummingbirds that were in the state. And then we had our hummingbird survey in the early, 1990s, and it was only supposed to be a 5-year survey using citizen science to kind of help us figure this out. And it was a project that lasted, I think, 20 years. So we had 20 years of data. So anyway, we found out 18 species visit the state of Texas.
And is it probably Rio Grande Valley? Or?
Well, no. West Texas, we get a lot that migrate through West Texas. We get a lot that migrate through Central Texas. And I'll show you here in just a minute. There is kind of a map. But we're on the Central Flyway for a variety of birds. So in Texas, the eastern half of Texas is where the ruby throat primarily occurs. So the black chin is on the western half. If you kind of draw a line right down the middle of Texas, it really is the eastern half and the western half for the most part. And then the broad-tailed, if you can see in this image right here, the male broad-tailed and the ruby throat look very similar. They both have this beautiful red gorget throat. But the broadtail does have a little bit more white. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, they both do have white underneath that red throat. However, when they are positioned on the branch, and you have to have binoculars, the ruby throat has a notched tail. So there's like a little cut, a V cut in the middle, and the broad-tailed has a rounded tail. So that's one way to tell them apart, should you be so lucky to see them perched somewhere. And you know how hummingbirds are. They're flying everywhere, so that's hard to sometimes see. And then I'm just going to show you the top 6 species, actually, of the 18. And so the things you should note are not only the colors, especially of the males, that would allow you to figure it out. Most of the females are, because they're, well, I don't want to jump ahead, but they're pretty drab. So they really are intended to blend in with the vegetation. So for the most part, they've got maybe green on them, and they've got a little bit of white. So they're going to blend in with most of the leaf litter in a canopy tree or in a shrub. But again, as you can see here, the rufous primarily migrates through West Texas, but occasionally they come through Central Texas. Sometimes they head over to the coast. How many of y'all have ever been to Rockport for the Rockport Hummingbird Festival? How many have never heard of the Rockport Hummingbird Festival? Well, I'm glad I'm here to tell you about it, because it is truly a wonder of Texas. You should go to it at least once in your life. You can go for the day. Just get up early in the morning, get there around, if you can, around 11-ish, have lunch, and then in the afternoon you can go to the high school there in Rockport, get yourself a little booklet, and it's online too, I believe, and you can figure out and kind of plan out which yards you want to go to. The yards are people who just love to have hummingbirds. Most of them have great hummingbird habitat on their property, and they invite the public to come onto their property to sit, and most of them are really gracious hosts. Sometimes they'll provide us water, they'll provide snacks, if you can believe that, and we're talking thousands of people go, so that's impressive. And or they'll just provide you with rocking chairs or chairs. If you want to bring your own, that's ideal. So you can sit and just kind of watch hummingbirds. And most of them will also put up feeders, so that way they'll bring in the hummingbirds much closer, so you get a better look at a lot of the hummingbirds. And again, you want to make sure you bring a pair of binoculars. Even though the feeders are close, you still want to bring your binoculars. Yes, ma'am?
NOS stands for?
NOS. Where is it? Oh, isolated numbers along the coast. That's for me. That's my little cue card. That's all right, no worries. But again, so the rufous, all 3 of these, bless you, the rufous, the Annas, and the buff-bellied, these are all 3 species that primarily migrate through West Texas, but they oftentimes can wind up in the Central Texas area. We do sometimes see them around San Antonio. I don't know if we would see them as far over as Seguin, but there is that possibility, especially if they're heading over to the coastline too. You might actually see them if you've got a feeder out, for instance, especially as they're migrating southbound. Yes?
When is the Rockport Hummingbird?
It is almost always the second weekend in September. So it's
19th of September.
So, but it's usually, I think, it starts, I think, a Thursday night and goes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So just pick a day and just go for the day. I mean, it's a doable day trip for sure. And you get to see some wonderful birds. So the buff-bellied is also Central Texas, and Anna's has a red cap. It's the only one that has a red hat. It does also have a red throat. It has what looks like a beautiful kind of a mauve on the front, the male does. The rufous is all rusty colored. The whole backside is rusty colored. A lot of our other hummingbirds typically have green on the backside. And so when you're looking at these hummingbirds, also note the color of the beak. So when you're trying to identify it later, you'll note most of our hummingbirds do have black beaks, but they can also have red or orangish colored beak, like the buff-bellied does on the bottom right there. So again, the buff-bellied has some rust coloration on it, and it does sometimes, it can look like a juvenile rufous, but look at the beak. Is the beak black or is it orange? So that might be one way to denote the two, if you're really into identifying what you're seeing. So the young'uns, unfortunately, sometimes make it tough for us to identify, because the young'uns don't always have all the wonderful colors that the adult males do. So it can be sometimes confusing, or we assume it's just a female because, again, she's going to be pretty drab in coloration. As I said, all 18, well, I didn't say this yet, but all 18 of our species do migrate. And they, of course, tend to go along with all of our other birds through the central flyway. Sometimes as they're doing their southbound migration, they sometimes wind up not making the full migration all the way down south. To South America, so they sometimes overwinter in southern Texas. So I will talk about that in just a second. But that when they hit Rockport, they have two choices at that point. Rockport and along the coast too. It's not just Rockport, but Rockport is where a lot of them seem to hit. And when they do, they're beefing up. They're hanging around for a couple of weeks, and they're just literally trying to double their weight, because once they go, if they decide to go across the Gulf of Mexico, it's a 500-mile trek, and there is no place to land. So if they can't make it, then they wind up, unfortunately, in the ocean. So, and it's about an 18 to 22-hour flight for them. So some of them will choose to go along the coastline all the way down to South America and Mexico area, but a lot of them tend to cross the Gulf, and that's why they're beefing up in Rockport. So that's why they're really actively feeding at these feeders and whatever else is available to them. Hummingbirds tend to come to Texas as early, we can start seeing them around mid-March. When they're migrating northbound, and then of course they can wind up heading southbound as late as mid-November. So I usually tell people, some people, there's like this thing about, take your feeders down at, what is it? I can't even remember, 1st of September or something, the early September. What holiday is in the 1st of September? Is it Labor Day? Labor Day. So a lot of times people will say, don't do that because they won't migrate, they'll stay at your house. That's not true. So the thing is, though, if there is any kind of storms, bad weather, sometimes you'll have a straggler and he's, it's struggling. And so if you can put out a clean feeder with clean solution, keep it clean, then ultimately you could be helping a little one kind of continue the journey south. And if they decide to stay and you notice that they're continually feeding at your feeder, then just keep the feeder up until you notice that there are no more birds and the solution is not being depleted. So as far as nesting is concerned, once mating occurs, for those of us who've raised children mostly alone, we can probably relate how difficult it is for this poor female hummingbird, because she will now build the nest, raise the young until they are fledged from the nest, obviously. So she's got a lot of work on her hands. And she will build these cup-shaped nests constructed of grasses, and she will actually go and collect spider weave to wrap this all up. So that actually, believe it or not, some of the threats to hummingbirds are spider webs because they are so small. Some of the spider webs have actually caught a hummingbird. And believe it or not, a praying mantis is also another one that will sometimes be in shrubs and they will snatch a hummingbird, if you can believe that. Some of the larger praying mantises. So that's pretty wild. That's what? An urban legend? We have pictures, we have proof. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a few cats or whatever, so whatever they shed, I get their fur and I put it in one of those little...
It's like a receptacle, you can put apples in it, or you can I've done that with my hair too.
So the birds
They can collect it, yes.
Is there anything that we could put out for the hummingbirds so they won't...
Probably, they usually use the down from seeds, so they're very specific probably. I don't know that they would probably use hair or anything, but other birds would. So, just keep putting it out. If a hummingbird uses it, if they find it, they may use it. It's hard to know, for sure. But as I mentioned, they usually use plant down for the lining inside. And how many of y'all are familiar with little Tic Tacs, the candy Tic Tac? That's about the size of a hummingbird egg. So usually she'll lay about 2 of those in her little cup-shaped nest. And then, of course, she's nice and camouflaged because, as you can see in this picture, she's kind of mainly a little bit of green, black, and white, and she blends in really, really well. There's 2 little, I don't know if y'all can see that, but there are 2 little heads in there that she's feeding right now. So as far as if they overwinter, The one thing I definitely encourage you to have on your property is if you have canopy trees already, that's wonderful. They will use that if for some reason they're falling behind during migration. Also, evergreen trees are really important. So if you have anything or shrubs for that matter, anything evergreen, if they're stuck or even during their migration, if they hit your property and all of a sudden, we've had freezes, we've had weird weather, all that kind of helps keep them protected if you can offer that to them. So that's probably one of the main things I would encourage you to look around your property, see if you have some evergreens. Live oaks work really well because they don't drop their leaves until February, but any other trees that you can provide as well. Smaller shrubs that are faster growing in case you don't have any trees on your property. So look at evergreen shrubs potentially. And as long as the birds are present, go ahead and keep feeding them. They will use water. A lot of people think they just only drink nectar, but they do use water as well, both for drinking and for bathing. So, there are a variety of different things. The one thing I always have to mention is anytime you put out a feeder, anytime you put out a source of water, you want to keep it clean. It's so important because disease transfer happens. That's like us having this party, and we're only passing out one plate. And we're going to all eat off the same plate for everything you've eaten tonight. So, of course, that's how disease transfers. Unfortunately, the ones that can be transferred anyway. Yes?
Where do you suggest that we put the sources?
The water, just a regular bird bath works.
In the sun, in the shade?
I would always put any kind of shallow water source in the shade and elevate it. If you can, don't put it in the middle of a beautiful garden where, like, if you have stray cats that potentially could. If you've really got a great wildscape, a great hummingbird or butterfly garden, it's going to be like an airport. Birds are going to be coming in, and the neighborhood cats are going to be like, ooh, there's a lot of activity in that yard. So they're going to go over there, and then all of a sudden, if they've got all this hiding space, they can kind of, especially if there's a bird bath or a bird feeder, yeah. So have it come out in the open, but have it in shade, because the shallow water will actually get hot. So you want to keep it relatively cool. It's going to be hot no matter what in Texas. So the shade just ensures that the water doesn't get boiling hot. Since it's shallow. But again, keep it clean, just replace the water as much as you can. And then what do they eat? As I mentioned, nectar is a large part of their diet. They do like red or orange tubular flowers that especially hang downward. A lot of salvias, my gosh, there's so many native salvias. Always a good choice for hummingbirds and even for butterflies. Some of the larger butterflies will use it. If you're going to put out a feeder, I can't forget this part. A large part of their diet, about 20%, is protein, so they're after insects, including spiders. So, if you're spraying for these little tiny critters, then of course you're depleting their food source. That means they have to travel further to find it in someone else's yard, and or they may not realize that insect has already taken up the insecticide or the pesticides. So again, you're kind of feeding poison to the very animal you're trying to attract. So that's another reason not to have pesticides or herbicides.
Do they eat mealworms?
Not so much.
And how do you keep the bees out? I know there's certain feeders.
Right, there are, and I kind of see it as you just share. I mean,
I think my bees have taken over some of
Oh.
And
Having multiple hummingbird feeders. The main thing really is probably having a great garden. I mean, that applies to all birds actually, because the beauty is if you have a lot of blooming plants, then a hummingbird visiting various flowers is less susceptible to picking up a disease from another bird that may have some type of disease. It's not so much with hummingbirds as it is with seed feeders. A lot of the seed feeders tend to sometimes have various diseases, more so I think than hummingbirds do. But again, you're still limiting. If they're visiting one area, then ultimately you wind up not having them come into contact with that particular disease, if that makes sense. Whereas at a feeder, it's again like having one plate. So let's see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, hummingbirds on average do feed every 10 minutes. So throughout the day when they are awake. At night, they perch, and so their heart rate during the day is around 1,200, 1,250 beats a minute. At night, they kind of shut down, kind of almost become comatose, and shut down to about 50 beats a minute. So if there's a storm, this has happened, I've found one time, if you find a hummingbird laying on the ground the day after a storm in your grass or in your garden, pick it up. just kind of massage it a little bit, see if it's, because it could still be in its comatose state. They will look dead, but of course, if it's blown out of the tree that it was in or out of the nest, it's just going to be laying there. It's still kind of maybe in its coma before it wakes up. So, but keep it, don't take it inside, just take it maybe under cover on your patio, kind of put something soft in there, lay it in there, dry it off if you think it's really wet. If it's been cold, kind of keep it a little bit warm. Do a sugar water solution and use a little eyedropper and just kind of put it near the beak to see if it especially if you think it's awake already, if it's kind of coming to. Sometimes that can actually help the hummingbird, and then it will fly off on its own once it's ready, and it will sometimes just kind of say, I need a break. I've had a rough night. That storm was hard, and then they will usually fly off. Yes, sir?
We have a golden at our place, and it walked in one day and opened its mouth, and the hummingbird fell out. She picked it up, brought it in to us, and we treated it and put it out on the porch, and the next morning she was gone. But that golden had the intelligence to scoop it up, walk in all the way in, open up its mouth and say, here, I got something for you.
That's awesome.
And it continued to come back to our house for many years.
Aww.
And then it would come up and land right on my finger.
Wow.
Come up and land right on my finger, because it remembered.
It is amazing. It's hard to know sometimes what animals think. So, I mean, there's so many examples where we see sometimes that animals definitely have good, strong feelings. I have a lot of information I'm going to share, and y'all have great questions, but I'll take your last one. But
You had the feeder.
oh, yes. Thank you. That is important.
Red or leave it?
Just leave it. If your feeder has red on it, or if it doesn't, you can just add like a silk flower that's red to it, and that will draw their attention to where your feeder is. And again, have multiple feeders out. It is a 1-to-4 ratio, so 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. And replace it about every 3 days in our Texas heat. If it's out in the hot sun, look at it. If you start seeing anything that looks like a film on the top surface, replace it. And then you can make a big batch and keep it in your refrigerator for about 2 weeks, and then you just kind of refill your feeder, wash it out. I like the Best One feeders because it's just a glass jar. You unscrew it, and it has 2 parts to it. So you can get to the inside. If there's any mold growth that happened on the inside, you can get to it, scrub it clean. You don't have to use any chemicals, just use some soap and water. Close it back up, add some more solution. And again, if you don't think you're going to have a lot of activity, don't fill the whole thing up. Just fill up like a couple of inches. And if it's gone in an hour, then you're like, whoa, I need to add some more. So you can kind of gauge from that. Yes, sir.
We talking standard issue table sugar?
Yes, sir. Just table sugar. And you don't have to add food coloring. So in the old days, food coloring had some bad properties that we shouldn't have even been ingesting.
So boil the water?
Yes. Yeah, it just helps. Yes. But it helps to dissolve the sugar for sure. Important information. Thank you for drawing me to that. I appreciate that. Okay, so I've got 15 minutes, and this is going to be fast. So I do want to share this, though. So butterflies, of course, there are a ton of butterflies. We have 20,000 worldwide, 725 roughly in North America. I don't know about Seguin area, but I do know in Bexar County we have about 184. And the joke here is my child, who was 10 years ago, was an avid Pokemon person. And at that time, there was only about 800 species of Pokemon monsters that existed. I'm sure there's probably double that now. But he knew all of them. So I was like, geez, you're putting me to shame because I don't know all of my butterflies in North America. So again, youth, what can you say? They do have certain benefits. As we get older, our memories just aren't up to the capacity that a young child's might be. But again, I did encourage him to start doing butterfly viewing and bird viewing. They're like, okay, you got a brain, let's start using it for other things too. All right, so there are different groups of butterflies, and I just want to highlight a few of the most common ones. We talked about the swallowtail already. They have those projections. They are the biggest butterfly that we have, and they do have those projections. So again, even if you don't know what kind of swallowtail it is, if you're with a friend, that's a swallowtail over there. You can impress still, because you know that it has those 2 little tails. So again, They typically, when they're feeding, they open and close their wings, so you can capture usually a picture if you have a decent iPhone. I will tell you, most butterflies, if you get closer than 4 feet, they fly off. They're comfortable at about 4 feet, and they do have special binoculars. I mean, there's birding binoculars that actually, if you want to get a closer view, I mean, most of the birding binoculars are for long distance, but if you're close, you do kind of want to also have the versatility of if you're going to buy a new pair, to also be able to butterfly watch with them too. Milkweed butterflies, we talked about those. Primarily the monarchs and the queens. Their host plant are the milkweed and the milkweed family. They are very specific butterflies, so they will only lay their eggs on milkweed plants. And of course, there is a toxin in that plant, and the benefit to the caterpillar is it ingests that toxin. It doesn't do any damage to the caterpillar, but when a bird eats it, it's like, oh, man, I ate a bad meal. And they remember that. So yes, one caterpillar might die, or 2 or 3, but eventually if that bird's smart enough, they'll figure it out. Oh, no, I remember those markings. I'm not touching that caterpillar. I'm moving on to something else.
They take one for the team.
That's right. So yeah, there are a few that may die, but unfortunately the lesson is learned by most birds that, hey, I'm not touching that caterpillar. The other thing I want to mention about caterpillars too, real quickly is, there is a recent research project that was done through Doug Talamay. I don't know if y'all know about Homegrown National Park. He's a great speaker, entomologist up north. One of his students did a research project and found that a family of chickadees, or parents of a clutch of chickadees, and chickadees I think you can have anywhere from 4 to 8, I think, in a clutch, took anywhere from 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to feed a clutch to successful fledglings. So keep in mind, these caterpillars that we're offering up to birds are so important in the spring, and especially even our hummingbirds. They're looking for that protein source, and they too will take probably a caterpillar if they can find one. So it's kind of like having a sausage, if you will. It's very soft and pliable. They can ram it down their children's throats, and they don't have to worry about any damage compared to something that is a seed, for instance, young babies. But anyway, it's just a really nice way to deliver great protein very easily for the parents. So brush-footed butterflies is one of the largest groups. There's about 8 subfamilies in this group. So again, here we see a red admiral on the top, a Gulf fritillary on the bottom, which are some of the common ones that you might see. Red admiral on the bottom, Gulf fritillary on the top. Sorry about that. Brush-footed butterflies, they tend to also have forelegs that are a little bit reduced, so they almost look like they only have 4 feet or 4 legs compared to the 8 that most butterflies have. I like the little one on the bottom there, the gossamer winged butterflies, the little blues, the coppers, and the hair streaks, because if you notice in the image, the head is actually on the far right side, and the tail is on the left, and they have like 2 little projections that look like antenna, and even the little black that you see there could be an eye inside that little red patch. So birds that are looking at this butterfly are like, oh, I see the head, because they'll usually go for the head, because they want to make sure that this butterfly is not going to fly off. So they'll lose their tail end sometimes, and they can still fly, but ultimately, they have just evaded being eaten by a bird. So it helps save them. And then hackberry butterflies. Hackberries get a really bad rap, unfortunately, but it is the number one plant for birds in general. There are like 40 different species of birds that love hackberry. And if you don't believe me, look in your yard, because every bird is planting it in your backyard, especially along the fence line. That's why we have hackberries constantly coming up on any fence line. And then the snout family, we've seen those huge, massive amounts of snouts that have crossed, across Texas, and they wind up, it's sad, because you're driving, you're like, oh my God, you're just killing them all, because they're just on the road. You can't get away from them. And they sometimes have these massive outbursts where they are just migrating short distances. But they too have a specific host plant, which is the hackberry. So these 2 butterflies rely heavily on hackberries. And so hopefully I've convinced you, at least for that reason maybe, to keep a hackberry on your property, or more. And then again, if you want to impress, the sulfurs and the whites, they are so difficult to identify, even when you get a close-up view of them. But you can again say, if there's a yellow butterfly, what are you going to call it? Sulfur. Hey, there's a sulfur. If it's a white, It's a light. So, and then skippers on the bottom right, they have a very unique look to them. They almost look like they're a moth, but they are, of course, very active during the day. So they, again, have knobby antennas, unlike most of our butterflies that have more delicate antenna. So they are a very unique, kind of buffed up version of a butterfly. And so most butterflies, of course, have 2 sets of wings. Most have 6 legs, again, except for the brush-footed. Their front ones are reduced, so you may only see 4. That would be one way to at least know that it's a brush-footed. They do have that long projection that comes out. You'll see it looks like a big, long straw that they put into those blooms, and that is a proboscis. And that's kind of like a straw that they use to suck out the nectar. They can see UV light, and they taste through their feet and as well through their antenna as well. The life cycle, for the most part, that this gentleman that I spoke to probably 30 years ago should know is that, of course, you have an adult butterfly. It lays its eggs on either a generic plant or a specific larval host plant, and then out comes a caterpillar. It'll be tiny, and then it'll eat through various stages. And so it'll kind of outgrow its skin, and it'll develop a new one. The old one busts out, and it can keep eating and eating and eating and getting bigger and bigger. So it may go through anywhere from 3 to 4 to 6 stages, depending on the butterfly or the caterpillar species. And then it turns into a chrysalis, not a cocoon. Cocoons are for moths. Chrysalises are for butterflies. And then, of course, eventually turns into an adult inside that chrysalis and emerges a beautiful winged beauty. Again, for a good nursery, you want to make sure you have larval host plants. Even if you don't know, I mean, just be tolerant. I always try to encourage people to be tolerant of all wildlife, actually, because, again, they don't have a lot of spaces, and so our backyards oftentimes are the only place they can find refuge. Have an abundance of food if you can. Try not to use pesticides unless you have a serious problem with a particular critter like termites or something like that. And then include shelter also in your butterfly gardens so that they can hang, because when they're oftentimes when they are kind of fat and full as caterpillars, you'll see them walking across the yard. They're looking for some kind of substrate to crawl up onto. Sometimes it'll be the side of your house, it might be a tree, a shrub or something, a fence of some kind. So they'll hang themselves upside down until they turn into that adult phase.
So what would you use for a shelter like that?
Again, just make sure you have like a variety, like if you have some woody plants mixed in with your beautiful butterfly garden, don't just have only forbs or soft-bodied plants. Okay. Have some shrubby plants too that have woodiness to it, and they can usually use that as a substrate. They'll grab a branch and just hang upside down. And they'll find something eventually, but it just makes it easier for them. But they are pretty mobile. And then the kids menu, again, depends on the plants, but they do feed frequently, and the nice thing is that most of those plants will come back very quickly. And as I mentioned, the adult menu is, of course, the nectar. They don't feed on anything else really other than nectar at that point, so that's why blooms are really important, especially in the spring. The one season of the year that usually doesn't offer a lot for a lot of our pollinators is summer, because we're so hot here. It's really hard to find blooming plants in the summer. So I would encourage you to possibly look at options. Texas is diverse. This is the ecoregion map, and here in Seguin area, you're probably going to be number 4 and number 3, which is Post Oak Savanna is number 3, and Blackland Prairie is number 4. For the most part, and so if you know that that is your ecoregion, depending on what where your property is located, make selections according to the plants. The website at the top here under Texas Wildscapes is to Lady Bird Johnson's Wildflower Center's website. They have a great number of butterfly gardening type of plant lists. They also have the ecoregion lists, so if you know what ecoregion you are, you can actually make plant selections and it'll actually sort for you. I wouldn't put too many criteria in, just say I have shade butterflies and the Post Oak Savanna, and see what pops up, and then look at that list of plants that it gives you. But it houses data on all of our Texas natives, and including all of the nation, believe it or not. I didn't know that. So if you go to another state, you can actually find the plants for that state. I do encourage you, whenever possible, to use natives. As I mentioned earlier, Doug Tallamy, who wrote the book Bringing Nature Home, he, along with the National Wildlife Federation, they've been doing backyard habitat certifications for the last, since the 70s or earlier even. So they have been a force that has been long and steady, and I would encourage you to look at information that they offer on their websites to get your yard certified if you want to. Parks and Wildlife used to do certified yards. We don't do that anymore. So we did mimic National Wildlife Federations. We do have some plant information for ecoregion in the state of Texas. So if you want one for your area, then just email me and just write in there, plant list. So I know when I'm searching through, write it in the topic, please, so I don't miss your email. I can send you something. But there is so much on Lady Bird Johnson. That's why, there's a ton of different plant lists. And then a Wildscape Yard, of course, provides the basics. As you can see, the 4 tick marks there: food, cover, nesting sites, and water. And really, depending on the plants that you select, the plants will provide the food, the shelter, and the nesting opportunities. So you don't have to be an expert. Go into a nursery if they offer a native, see what you like and plant it, and just kind of enjoy the experience of figuring out, hey, what's visiting my garden and using that plant. And you will learn firsthand if you don't know already. And so the simple formula that I want to leave you with is, again, focus on native plants, add a water component, and that is a great start to any kind of habitat. Whether you know what you're doing or if you don't, it doesn't matter. If you put it in the ground and it's native, wildlife will figure it out and they will come to it and visit it. Sally Wasowski, The Native Texas Plants by Sally Wasowski. This is my one book. If you only picked one book, I would highly encourage you to use this one. It's very user-friendly. Most of the plants in this book are now in most nurseries. So it's been around for 35 years, I think, and it's been my guru plant and everybody else's. So it is a great, great plant book. To kind of get you started as well. And it talks about the different ecoregions in the front pages. And I've got 2 minutes, and so I'm not even done, but I'm going to have to come back, I guess. But again, there are a lot of great, valuable resource books out there. If you have a picture or if you have access to this later, then you can see it again. My favorite is Native Texas Plants by Sally Wasowski, and even our Texas Wildscapes book is a good resource. Wildflowers of the Texas Hill Country by Marshall Enquist is another great field guide if you want to look at forbs. Even though it's for the hill country, even in this Blackland area, a lot of those plants might be in that book, so you might be surprised. A lot of great books. And then websites. I definitely want to leave you with this. Lady Bird Johnson, I mentioned already. Audubon has a great database as well for birds, including hummingbirds. So I would encourage you to visit that website. Each website kind of brings a little, has different benefits to visiting it and offers different information. So there's not I still love Lady Bird Johnson's, the wildflower one. That's still my favorite by far. These other websites, Audubon and even National Wildlife Federation. National Wildlife Federation, I think, has, for each plant listed, you can go by zip code as well, but each plant that they list showcases, I think, how many species of insects use that plant, I think. Like an oak tree, I think it was, I want to say, is it 600 or 300? Actually, I think it's closer to 600 species, depending on the type of oak tree. So again, there's a lot of great information. Of course, Native Plant Society of Texas has some great plant lists as well. Bless you, by the way. These are things that I would encourage you to look at. And of course, don't forget invasives.org. If you're not sure about a plant or an animal, then please check this website out, because it is important that we're not propagating invasive species, because unfortunately, like for instance, the one example that I like to give is, bless you, goodness, something going around. Chinaberry tree. It's a common plant. Unfortunately, the birds do love it. They love to eat the fruit on that tree, but then they replant it for us, just like the hackberry. So it winds up in our riparian areas and becomes a monoculture stand, and it widens up, kind of elbowing out all the natives along these riparian areas. So do be aware that, there are consequences. Sometimes it's not what we realize, but there are, people, volunteers that are battling, trying to remove these invasives that these wildlife species bring into these natural areas. So be I guess, responsible, if I may ask, about just making sure that you're not having a plant that does perpetuate being spread and becoming very prevalent in our natural spaces and natural areas. And then, again, just focus on plants. This is the last slide I'm going to show you because it's almost 8:01. I'm going to get in trouble. But focus on plants that create a food source. I like to focus on the food. You know, is it a nectaring plant or does it offer some type of fruit? Fruit meaning it can be a berry, it can be a seed, it can be a nut, it can be a drupe. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's a variety of different fruits. Most native plants will have a bloom. It may be very small and tiny, but again, a lot of small butterflies will use it, or other insects and pollinators will use it. So keep that in mind, and make sure that when you're purchasing these plants that the nursery itself isn't using the wholesale grower didn't use any type of neonicotinoid or any kind of pesticides, because oftentimes the plants will absorb that chemical, and then you're kind of turning around and offering it to your, especially like, let's say, your monarchs, if they're, I'm sorry? Yes, you're poisoning essentially the very butterflies that you're trying to attract. So, I'm done, I guess, for now. Do I have time for a question or no? And if not, that's okay.
What did I hear when you said rotted fruit? One of your slides said you can put out.
You can put out any kind of rotting fruit. Pears, oranges, butterflies, they'll land on it. Probably anything that's kind of like a banana. Bananas work really well. Pears, fruit, anything that kind of, yeah, I would go with things that kind of naturally, slowly kind of ripen, over-ripen, that we tend to use to cook. That's what butterflies, but bananas are the best. You can really, but pears, yeah. So, I don't know if the grapes would do well, but it might. Oh, I'm connected.
Where was your contact information? Did I miss that?
Oh, I will put it at the end, and you can see all.
I want